I was living in a rural area in Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house, and I'm probably 10, 11 at this time. One night I'm sleeping in my room when I randomly and abruptly wake up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room on the couch. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing more urgent, so I grudgingly forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around a corner and past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distinct click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Finally, it shut completely off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot as my mind begins realizing that no one else is home except for my mom and myself. Then the white shape began whispering in a quiet man's voice, "Help me, I'm lost." I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't, and instead I barely said, "No," before this thing starts running at me on what sounded like all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother, shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure terror like that in my life, even to this day. She grabs me by the arms and pulls me into my room and slams the door. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listen. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open, then slammed. We sat there horrified until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town for a while after that, and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was so unnatural. My mom still will not tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream. She tells me she's afraid it will know we're talking about it, and it will come back. This is the first of many weird things that have happened in my life. Here I lay, all snuggled up in bed, warm and satisfied under the soft silk covers, watching some stupid documentary on TV I'd never heard of. I'd turn it over, but the gallon tub of cookie dough ice cream wouldn't let me use my hands for anything other than shoveling the frozen treat into my mouth. Nights like these are rare. It isn't often that everyone's out of the house but me, so I make sure to savor them. In fact, I wasn't expecting anyone back till the morning. That's what made the sound of the door opening downstairs so alarming. Panic hits me like a steam train. I silently leap out from under the covers, spilling the ice cream all over the pristine white carpet on the floor, and creak open the wardrobe next to the bed. I hear footsteps, heavy and indiscreet, like they want me to know they're here. I panted and picked up the spoon I had just been using to enjoy a relaxing night. The footsteps get louder, and I force myself into the minuscule space remaining in the wardrobe and close the door, just as the stranger opens the bedroom door, not sparing any seconds for silence. I peer through the gap. His face looks familiar, but I can't place my finger on where I know him from. He spots the spilled ice cream and darts his head across the wide expanse of the bedroom. "Hello?" he calls, not sounding vicious, but I've made that mistake before. Never, under any circumstances, assume friendliness from a voice. He looks under the bed. Oh crap, he's looking for someone. I hold back a whimper and start bending the bowl of the spoon back and forth, hoping to snap it off and create some way of defending myself. It snaps, but it creates a metallic click. The man turns his head around and makes his way to the wardrobe. I'm shaking now. "Please don't open it. Please don't open it. Please don't open it." The door swings open, and he sees me. We scream simultaneously in fear and surprise. Without hesitation, I leap onto the man and start digging into whatever stretch of flesh I can with the sharp edge of the spoon handle. He screeches in clear pain, but I won't stop. I hammer the handle deep into his chest and neck, over and over, till he becomes motionless. I've killed him. I cry in disgust and sprint downstairs and away from the house. I charge down the road until I feel like I'm far enough away. I sit down for a moment and exhale heavily before regaining my composure. Pulling out my phone, I open Twitter and search party. Hopefully this time I'll find a household that isn't lying when they say they'll be out all night. On our way home from vacation, my 5-year-old daughter and I got stuck in traffic caused by an accident up ahead. My daughter asked why we had stopped, and I told her someone had wrecked. That's when she responded, "Remember when that happened to me?" I was confused. She'd never been in a car accident. I laughed, thinking she was playing pretend or something, and asked her what she was talking about. "Don't you remember? We was going to the store, and then we hit something, and then the glass cut me, and it hurt so bad, and I was so scared at first. I thought I was dying, but Daddy kept saying I would be okay, and I knew he wouldn't lie. I just stared at her for a minute, not sure what to say. For one thing, the whole thing was crazy. I'd never been in an accident, and neither had my daughter. And the other thing was that she didn't have a daddy. I mean, of course she had a father, but he wasn't part of the picture. He never had been. So where was she getting this from?" Traffic cleared, and we continued on our way home, and it slipped from my mind. A few weeks later, while on the phone with my mom, I remembered it and told her about it. After a pause, my mom told me that when she was just about 3 years old, there had been a car accident, and that her older sister, who was 5 at the time, had been killed when a piece of glass from the windshield had somehow slit her throat. It was such a tragedy that for the most part, her family tried to pretend it hadn't happened, getting rid of everything that reminded them of her sister, and never mentioning it, which is why I never knew about it. My mom said she could barely remember the accident itself since she was so young, but she said she'd never forget her dad crying as he held her sister in his arms and repeated over and over again, "You'll be okay." I felt chills run down my spine as I wondered how my daughter could have possibly known that. I was 19 years old and still living at home. My dog Cooper, a pit bull, always slept with me. He would never wake up at night, let alone bark or whine. This is one of the reasons I was so unnerved when I was awoken around 3 a.m. one dark night. When I was awake enough to know what was happening, I noticed that Cooper was standing over me. All the fur on his back was standing on end, and he was making a noise that I had never heard him make before. It sounded like a mix between a growl and a cry. I was more worried about him than about what had frightened him at that point. That is, until I noticed what he was looking at. Cooper was staring straight at the window right next to my bed. He had such anger and fear in his eyes. I didn't even know such emotion could be displayed by a dog's eyes. As soon as I looked at the window, Cooper turned around and sprinted out of my room. I sat completely still for a minute before I gained the courage to look at the window again. I slowly turned my head towards the window. The dread began to gather, but I knew I had to. I finally turned my head the last couple inches and forced my eyes to look, but I didn't see anything. But I definitely heard something. I sat completely still in my bed, suppressing the childish urge to cover my face with blankets and hope whatever was out there went away. But my curiosity held me in my place. I had to know. Suddenly, I heard heavy and slow footsteps outside my window. The rocks outside made them sound too loud and too close. The footsteps were too heavy to belong to any animal that might be innocently scurrying past my window. They were most definitely human, or human-like. Completely still, I sat and waited. The footsteps stopped for a few seconds, and then they seemed to go back the way they came from. That just happened to be towards the back door of my house. A sound from outside my room in the hall drew my attention away from the window. It sounded like Cooper running down the hall. Before I could react, the back door opened and closed. Someone had let Cooper out. My legs seemed to know what to do before I did. I was in the hall and at the back door in seconds. I just stood there, with my hand hovering above the doorknob for what seemed like minutes. Paralyzing fear was preventing me from actually turning the knob, but I knew Cooper was out there, and I needed to save him from whatever was there. With that thought, I turned the knob and threw the door open. I don't know what I was expecting, But complete and utter silence was not it. The countryside is usually much more lively at night, with crickets and all. As for lighting, there wasn't any. I took one hesitant step out of the doorway. That was when I heard it. It was the same noise I'd heard Cooper make earlier. I felt a hand on my shoulder and whipped around. It was my father wondering what on earth I was doing and telling me to get inside. I frantically tried to explain that Cooper was out there with something that walked past my window a few minutes before. My father looked at me like I was insane. Apparently, Cooper was sleeping on his bed. He had been there all night.